This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Oh, man, we got a good one here for you. Fishing for those big king salmon in Fort Peck Reservoir over in northeast Montana has become so incredibly popular. It's almost become, well, for some people, like my good friend the captain, a bit of an obsession. And I guess maybe me too. But there's so much more to it than just that beautiful fish you have the opportunity to catch. And so I wanted to spend some time to catch you up on that. Before we do, I want to take care of a couple little housekeeping things. Number one, when you found this podcast, whether you came to us from montanooutdoor.com, as many of you do, but also a lot of you come to us from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, list goes on and on. There's probably 25 or 30 different places you can find this podcast. When you get there, there is a podcast description. When you read through that description, if you did, down towards the bottom, there's a highlighted thing says links. And under that will be different links. So as we talk about it, if there's more information about it, I'm going to put a link to that more information right down there. So feel free to either click on those as we go along or just sit back, relax and listen. And then you can refer back to that and get more information. And the other thing I want to do, as I always do, is welcome our active military out there all around the world who listen to this podcast. As I always say, it is really an honor that when you get some time off of the incredible things that you men and women do, you spend time with us and listen to this podcast. I hope we bring a little bit of home back to you. And thank you for your emails and all that. And if you ever want to ask about any of this or you need me to do a little shout out for you, it's Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. All right. Now I want to bring on with us my good friend, Heath Headley. Heath has been on our podcast many times before, but I really want to dig deep into how these beautiful king salmon go from what you catch to, from the beginning to that. And there is a pretty amazing thing that happens. So first, Heath, I want to welcome you back to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thanks for being here today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, Heath, before we get started, because this podcast has grown massively, it seems like every week there's just more and more and more of you, which we love. So some folks may not be familiar with you. So if you could just give us a little bit of background on what you do for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and a little history about yourself. We'll start there, and then we'll get into all the good stuff.
Sure. So yeah, like you mentioned, I'm a fisheries biologist for Fort Peck. I've been here since 2006. And as far as background, I grew up in northeast South Dakota, Glacial Lakes region, in between like Webster area. That's probably kind of the closest town that some people might realize. But yeah, very, very neat area, unique area, and probably like a lot of everybody else, that listens to, these hunting, fishing podcasts. I spent a lot of time in the outdoors, fishing, hunting, probably fishing more than anything. And a lot of that had to do with my grandpa. He really always, instilled that in me at a young age, took me along with him, and just absolutely had a great time. And, there wasn't too many fish species that we didn't, try to catch. And that was a neat thing about that area up there. I mean, there was walleye, perch, pike, bass, both smallmouth, largemouth, and some neat panfish opportunities. So yeah. And I actually went on to South Dakota State University, where I received my bachelor's degree. And then I moved to Wyoming, did some temporary fisheries work as a technician there, and worked in the Casper area and then over in Pinedale, over in the western part of the state. So I got to see some really neat opportunities, what Wyoming had, with some reservoirs and some rivers, some high mountain lakes, some stuff like that. And then after that, it kind of really just, kept the interest, there. It's like, I always want to learn more, and we have these questions. And so I did go on to graduate school. I actually went to Ball State in Indiana, and I worked up on southern Lake Michigan for 2 years and received my master's degree out there. And I really looked at primarily yellow perch growth, population dynamics, and then, I wanted to get back west. And like I said, I was lucky enough to move to Fort Peck in 2006, and I've been here since as a fisheries biologist.
Well, and we're lucky that you decided to do that, because you and your staff really do an amazing job and have turned this Fort Peck fishery into just a world-class fishery, from some of the biggest and most plentiful walleye that you'll ever find in the world to then, as we're going to talk about today, these amazing king salmon. And I always love it when I talk with people that aren't from here, or even people that are from here, that they just don't realize you can catch king salmon, those great big king salmon, in Montana. And so it's always fun to tell them, because they'll usually say, well, you can't do that in Montana. Well, yeah, you can. Give us a little history, Heath, about how this king salmon came to be in Fort Peck Reservoir and how all that got started.
Sure. So Chinook salmon, king salmon, like you mentioned, they were actually first stocked into Fort Peck in 1983. And, part of the rationale behind that was actually, North and South Dakota had Chinook salmon in their large reservoir systems like Sakakawea and Oahe. And, Fort Peck and, fishery staff saw that opportunity. And I talk about these big reservoir systems, you in the summer months, you basically have kind of your warmer layer up, on top, and then you have cold water down below. And there's obviously a good amount of water out here, on Fort Peck. And it does provide that habitat, to support Chinook salmon. And, along those times, back in those early to mid 80s, Cisco were introduced as well. And they took off really, really well. And so it was, the type of deal where we have the habitat, we have the forage now, and let's see if we can, make something happen here, like North and South Dakota, by stocking Chinook salmon. And I would point out that like some of the very first stuff, originated from the Great Lakes, and then North and South Dakota helped as well. They were doing collection efforts, and we were able to, get some of those eggs that would eventually turn into small fish to get stocked into Fort Peck.
Yeah, so I guess the origins of our king salmon in Fort Peck came from the Great Lakes, and like you say, from South Dakota. And was there any from North Dakota, or is it all just in North Dakota and South Dakota?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yep.
So then that kind of got the thing started. And what a lot of people don't realize is, often we think of Chinook salmon, king salmon, as, they're born in fresh water up in Alaska, then they swim out into the ocean, and then they spend most of their short lives in the ocean, then come right back to where they were born, and then they spawn. Now, in a reservoir like Fort Peck, that's not a natural habitat, they're not able to do that, are they?
Nope, that's correct. Yeah, everything, that's swimming around out there in Fort Peck is, a result of our egg collection efforts, or I should say, adult collection efforts. And then once we collect those adults, we, collect eggs from the females and sperm from the males, fertilize them, and then they're raised at the Fort Peck hatchery here.
Okay. So that part, I probably get the most questions, people emailing me and talking to me and saying, now, what do they mean by egg collection? And no, it's not like Easter where, he swims around with a basket and collects eggs. It's a whole different process. And we're going to get into that. But I wanted to kind of stay where we're at right now and just learn a little bit more about that process. So the ocean-going king salmon, they live, as I understand it, typically, around 4 to 7 years old before they'll come back to their birthplace up in Alaska or in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep. There's some that can live upwards of 7 years old. And what we see, and maybe that's what you were going to ask me, Dale, is what we typically see out here for Aegis Chinook salmon. And that's another part. We actually do take the otoliths from these fish in the fall, once we spawn them. And we get an idea of kind of what the composition is of, that particular spawn. Is it 3-year-old fish or what? But just to give you an idea, and the listeners, typically when we're seeing these fall fish that are mature, they're going to be anywhere from 2 to 4 years old. We rarely see a 5-year-old fish, and I know that was kind of a big question this summer with anglers. It's like, wow, these fish are huge. They got to be 5-year-olds. And I was actually looking this data up just kind of in preparation of this question, and again, just to let folks know. But yeah, since we've been aging these fish on an annual basis, since like 2006, and really trying to figure out, obviously how old they live, but by doing so, we can figure, what particular year they were stocked, and what might have had the best results. At any rate, it looked like we have had a total of about 18 female fish that were age 5 years. The rest, it was like 2,400 that were a combination of 3 and 4-year-old fish. So yeah, not very many 5-year-old fish.
You did find some 5-year-olds in there. Okay.
We did, but that's over the course of what, I think about 18 years, something like that.
So pretty rare.
Pretty rare. And it's not out of the question, but it could possibly happen.
And the way that you're aging them, that say that it's a otolith.
Otolith, yeah.
Otolith.
It's yep.
That's in the ear, right?
Yep. It's called kind of the ear bone, if you will. That's kind of the nickname. It's essentially a calcium deposit, just piece of bone. But the fish has that, and at least for the fish's purpose, it kind of helps them with their orientation, if you will. Mm-hmm. And by extracting that otolith from that fish, and obviously the fish has to be dead, but these salmon are going to die anyway, so we do get this information from them. And what we typically do is we'll make a section of it, and then we will put it underneath a microscope with some light. And you can look at that otolith, a very thin section of it, and you can count rings on there just like you would a tree. And that's how we determine, how old that particular fish was.
Wow, that's amazing. The science of that to be able to do that. So that gives you an idea, folks, of how old they are, and that was another question that I get from some folks that, aren't as familiar with the fish biology and that. And they say, well, why do they kill them to get the eggs out and that? Why don't they let them, so we have more and more fish? Well, a salmon, that's the nature of what they do. Yeah. Once that biological clock goes off and says, hey, it's time to, make babies, that's what they go to do, and then they die. And that's what's going to happen. So in this case, the salmon are their biological clock goes off, and now they're heading back. Now, if they were out in the ocean, it would tell them, okay, time for you to go back where you were born, because that's where you're going to now make your babies. In this case, since that doesn't happen, when the Fort Peck fish, when that goes off for those king salmon, where do they head to? What are they doing? Because obviously that must be something similar to tell them to go somewhere, right?
Yes, correct. So what we do is we stock these Chinook salmon. They'll spend several months at the Fort Peck hatchery, which is below the dam, and they'll spend several months in there. And the guys at the hatchery will be raising them, feeding them, and then they will get stocked out in roughly end of May, first part of June, and we actually release them at the fishing access sites or the boat ramp areas near the dam area of Fort Peck. And so typically, yeah, they will come back to those spots where we release them, but they will, have a tendency to stray. So, and when I say stray, they might end up, around the next bay, not right at the boat ramp potentially, but, in another bay over or a couple bays over. And part of that, is we just don't have super strong, like water flows, inflows, creeks, and, we don't have that running water that they really imprint on. So there is a little bit of, they come back to the spot, but not the exact spot, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas with the salmon that go from the streams out to the ocean and then back, there's a pretty radical difference between the salt water they've been living in and then those streams from their home waters. So as I understand it, they've imprinted from the time they were born from that egg to just a little bitty minnow. Something gets put into their memory banks, and that's how they find their way back. So is it like smell, or do they even know what makes them go back exactly?
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, Dale, but yeah, there's definitely some, I believe, olfactory cues and senses in there that are involved, things that, that are well beyond our realm of comprehending, but and it is interesting that you mentioned that. And I think I would even back up a little bit further, because I do recall, some studies, if you will, some papers out there that, it's even, shortly after those fish hatch out, so this imprinting is taking place, probably much earlier than some people would guess. If they're, a couple inches long, it's actually probably, somewhere in that hatching out phase.
Wow.
Yeah, very impressive, to say the least, in how they do it.
Yeah, and whatever all they take in, it allows them to go back. So like I had heard, I spent some time up in Alaska, and some of the biologists there were telling me that some of those salmon will leave Alaska, go as far south as Mexico, and then come all the way back home and go right back to the very place that they hatched. And so one of my thoughts is, well, I wonder if they're going down to that dam area, because on the other side of the dam, not too far from there, that's the hatchery where they were born. Yep. So do you think that has something to do with it, or is it just, no, it's where they got put into Fort Peck?
Yeah, I do believe that, Dale, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I have, actually have, good conversations with North and South Dakota fisheries staff, and, maybe just to kind of confirm that, that those fish return, to the same area where they were released and even almost raised, essentially. I know North Dakota has seen tagged salmon stocked, mid part of the reservoir on Sakakawea, but their hatchery is located, directly below the dam, and they actually get their water from, right up above there. And, regardless if they stock those salmon in Sakakawea, like mid-reservoir, they would still see them show up near the dam area. So again, just to kind of go back to that, topic that we were discussing of, that very early imprinting and then even, stocking, once they go out in the reservoir, yeah, there's something going on.
Yeah, it just amazes me. Mother Nature keeps some secrets we may never figure out, but
yeah, and it's even when we think we know something, we answer one question and we have about 5 more, that come up.
Right, exactly. Now that you know that, well, there might be some others. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, I want to get into how these salmon get collected, and how we get to those eggs, and then we're going to get to some information that I know a lot of these hardcore salmon fishermen in Fort Peck want to know is, how did that egg collection effort go? So we'll get into that, plus a whole lot more, right after this. Hey, I want to tell you a bit about one of the great businesses that is responsible for making this podcast possible. I'm talking about my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They're a well-established Montana company with origins starting way back to 1977. They've been proudly serving the Missoula community and, well, far beyond that since then. Yeah, so no matter where you're listening, they can help you. Now, again, if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that some of the things Superior Hardwoods is most known for are their extraordinary flooring lines. In fact, a majority of those are manufactured right there in their lumber yard in Missoula. And speaking of flooring, they just introduced the Timeless Pre-Finish series. Now, this is a series designed to simplify the overwhelming task of remodeling and replacing the old worn-out flooring in your home. This new series allows you to effortlessly transform any room pretty much instantly. This flooring is made in America and comes in pre-finished maple, hickory, white oak, red oak, ash, and reclaimed oak. It's just beautiful. It has a superior quality sealer and matte finish to it. Now, this totals 6 coats of durable protection on the floor. But along with all their different flooring lines and their acres of reclaimed beams and lumber, they also offer fantastic products to complete your remodel. Thousands of feet of alder molding and hundreds of square feet of stunning antique paneling. Just beautiful stuff. That's going to make your home feel special to you and your family and friends every time they come see you. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, but when you work with the folks at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, you'll be able to create a look for your home that says who you really are to all who stop by. I guess what I'm trying to say is it completes your remodel project to the point that your house just doesn't have a new look or updated look to it. No, it becomes much more than that. Not just a house you live in, but it is now uniquely your home. And it'll feel that way, not just because the project is completed. No, it will feel that way every time you and your family and friends walk through the door. That, my friends, is the difference that Superior Hardwoods of Montana makes. Stop by their showroom in Missoula, Montana today if you can, or give them a call at 406-251-2272, or just visit their website. It's a great way to get to know them at superior-hardwoods.com. That's superior-hardwoods.com, and let them guide you through the woods. And we are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. My guest is Heath Headley, biologist for the Fort Peck Reservoir, and we're talking all about these king salmon since he and his staff just got done with this incredible egg collection effort, and we'll get into that in a bit and find out how all that went. But we were learning a bit about how these salmon, go where they swim off into Fort Peck, who knows where, then around anywhere from 3 to 4, and rarely, but sometimes 5 years old, they come heading back, and even 2 years old. So now they come back, they go to where they were put in or down to the dam area. And that just happens. So these salmon, their biological clock goes off whenever it decides to go off, but it's always in the fall that they decide, okay, time to go make babies. Correct, Heath?
Yep, that's correct. And like you mentioned there, it could be a combination of 2 to 4 year old fish, and they are fully mature. Their reproductive organs have fully developed, and they're attempting to spawn, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna show up typically. This year it seemed like they actually showed up a little bit earlier than normal, Dale. Even though our water temperatures were slightly on the warmer side, I know. So we actually started collecting October 4th. It was a Friday. We went out just to kind of see what was out there, and yeah, like I said, the water temps were kind of I think low 60 degrees, which is early, but there were some fish there, and at least to me, it was kind of a good and bad thing, if you will, because, I really don't like to see warmer temps, during our collection efforts with these salmon. They're obviously a cold water fish. And so when they spend, an excessive amount of time in warmer water, it's not good for them or their egg quality if it's a female. But the good thing was that it's like, if there's fish here already, I have a sneaking suspicion that we might be set up for a good season. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
There's going to be a lot around, and that it kind of panned out that way for us, Dale.
Excellent. Well, so when they decide to come back, and maybe I'll back up a little bit. So for the last, say, 2 to 4 years, they've been out all around Fort Peck going to, well, who knows where, but they're all over. And sometimes people will catch a salmon when they're ice fishing or that, the smaller ones. It does happen. But this whole time that they're out there, they're just feeding like crazy, right? Just trying
absolutely.
to. Okay.
Absolutely. That's their whole, ingrained nature. That was their one purpose in life, is to eat, grow, and mature, and that's it, unfortunately for them. But they excel at that job.
Yes,
really.
They do.
And these last couple of years, we've really seen that phenomenal growth, and a lot of it has to do with our Cisco production. Thankfully there's been some good Cisco numbers out there, so
right,
that has helped things a lot, Dale.
That's what I was going to say. That's where the Cisco comes in, is, they're out there just feeding like crazy on these Cisco, and that's what's, as we like to say, bulking them up and all that. So this year, when it always seems like, I don't know, around July or so, that's when you start seeing more and more of them. You're able to find them. They tend to group up a little bit more, and we start catching them. That's what we call blackjaw fever sets in, and we can't resist. We got to be out there. And so they're out there feeding, and we're able to catch them at that point. But it seemed like this year there were some big salmon, bigger than we normally see. Now, why was that? Do you just attribute that to a great crop of Cisco, or what do you see in there?
Yep, exactly, Dale. So that's one of the big drivers is the Cisco, and I mean we just wrapped up our Cisco monitoring surveys here in end of September, and holy smokes, there was a lot of Cisco, and a bulk of them, Dale, were actually again, this was September. They were right around about 6 inches in length. That's kind of what they were averaging. And so if we back up the clock about a year ago, those Cisco were out there, but they were a little bit smaller, so they were there the whole time for this particular group of salmon to be feeding on them. They were there last fall, even late summer last fall. And, the salmon that didn't mature last year, they were growing, they were eating, they had all those Cisco there kind of in front of them, to just keep that pedal down and stack on their growth. And again, kind of going into this other part of it, looks like a lot of these fish are 4-year-old females, that we saw, along with a few 4-year-old males too, Dale. So we had that combination of an older age group of salmon present, as well as some phenomenal Cisco to eat. And it was, that just really drove, the growth rates we saw. And consequently, a new state record Chinook salmon being caught, and then and then even here a smallmouth bass. So I don't think it's coincidence that there are two state records, in the same year. So
right.
I think you can definitely kind of point towards Cisco as being a big help.
Yeah, we got to thank the Cisco for what we're all the great fishing that we're getting to have in Fort Peck. So now we move to that time where all of a sudden their biological clocks start going off. You, like you were saying, you're out there checking, you start seeing more and more of them coming in, and it looks like, well, it's time. Love is in the air, and it's time for them to do their thing. Now, they can't really spawn, but they think they should be doing something. So here's where it gets interesting, is then go through this process of how do you collect all these fish and get the eggs out of them and all that. Take us through that process.
You bet. So like you said, we're nearing that time where the salmon they'll start to come in shallow when they're thinking about attempting spawn. And again, a good amount of it's kind of water temperature driven. We really see good spawning activity when that water temps hit about 55 degrees surface temps, and usually that's mid-October. But we go out there and we actually use an electrofishing boat just to temporarily stun those fish so we can net them quick. And then we have a large hauling tank in that boat set up with recirculating water system, just to keep fresh water pumping on them so they're in good shape. And that's kind of really the first part of it. And then once we get enough fish in there, and actually this year the fish were obviously on the larger side. We kind of had to limit how many fish we could put in there, and then that's where like guys from the Fort Peck hatchery, they would meet us with a large hauling tank, and we would separate the males and females, load them up on that tank, and then they would get brought back down to the Fort Peck hatchery and put in the raceways so we could monitor them, especially the females, and just kind of check them, almost on a daily basis. Because that's the other thing too. Like, I get this question. It's like, well, it's, the 1st of October and how come you guys aren't out there? And it's, well, usually we are, but sometimes we're, don't have to be in a big hurry, because if it's early October, temperatures aren't right. Those females, they're not releasing their eggs, Dale. And when they're not releasing their eggs, it doesn't mean they're ready to spawn, and the eggs won't be successfully fertilized. So we really don't see that until, we get into that ideal, temperature photo period. And then that's when all the real magic happens, if you will.
Right. So now this is interesting, because I, for some reason, thought, okay, when you take that electrofishing boat, and we're going to talk a bit about that thing too. I especially want to know where you keep the keys to that boat. But so when you stun them like that, then I thought, well, then you get the eggs out of them right there. But you take them actually back to the hatchery then?
Yep, okay. That's correct. Yep. Well, the whole spawning egg collection process takes place down at the Fort Peck hatchery.
Okay.
Yep.
So how do you one, I guess let's talk about the physical part of this boat. How does that work? And then what do you use to scoop them all up with?
So as far as the electrofishing boat goes, we have two booms out in front, and it sends some electric current through the water, and we do have a regulator, if you will, on this certain box that can control how much electricity we put out, to stun them. Because, like I say, we want to be, as careful as possible on these fish, and especially females that have eggs. And like this year, I think maybe people will find this interesting. I actually had a conversation with a guy at the boat ramp, and it's, type of deal where actually larger fish have more surface area, so they have a tendency to get hit the hardest. So we kind of had to dial that back a little bit. And again, just stun these fish enough where we can net them with some very long nets that we have, because we're reaching out there quite a ways, and we're sometimes reaching pretty deep, just to try and be as effective as we can.
Okay, so it doesn't kill them; it just stuns them. So if there's other fish down there with them, do those all get stunned as well? I assume, right?
They do, but typically when there's salmon present and they're in the back of a bay or along the edge of the shore, it's mostly salmon, Dale. We don't see a lot of other fish. We'll maybe see some small perch or minnows, but it's not like we're constantly seeing walleyes and pike and other stuff like that. It's almost strictly salmon.
Well, yeah, I guess if I was a smaller fish, knowing that beast is a voracious eater, I'd probably stay away from that area too.
Yep.
So you stun them, you get them all scooped up, then they're transported, and then how long did they live in the hatchery before you start actually getting the eggs from them?
And honestly, it can be, the very next day. If those females will start to ripen up, meaning they'll start to release their eggs, or it could be a period of several days, maybe sometimes almost a week, just depending on where we're at, or I should say where that fish is at, in its spawning phase. Because just like, I guess they all have their own little bit, uniquenesses, if you will, and not all fish are on the same schedule. So yeah, and then from there, like I said, if those females are ripe, meaning they're ready to release their eggs, we will take them out of there. We will also get, hopefully, it's usually more than one female that we're spawning. We're usually spawning anywhere from 10 to 20, 30, sometimes 40 fish. I think we spawned 40 females one day. But we'll also get a group of males together. We'll get sperm or milt from them, pool it together, and then so we'll do a batch of females right at that same time. And so get the eggs out, fertilize them with sperm from the males, add water, which actually activates the sperm, and there's the fertilization process.
Okay. And so when you're extracting the eggs from them, are you just squeezing those salmon and the eggs are coming out of them?
Good question. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's actually called air spawning. And I think, some people may be familiar with it. It's done at some other hatcheries with some salmonids. But what that involves is we take that female, put it up, hang it so it's basically, upright. And so the vent, where the eggs come out, it's hanging down. So we actually let gravity do a little bit of work, and then we have an air compressor set up where you take a needle and you insert it up towards the top of the cavity, up in the chest, and it just pushes those eggs right down. So, you're not squeezing that fish constantly, because sometimes you can, depending on, how that fish is, if it's not ready to release all those eggs, you are going to be, working them over and potentially damaging, crushing some of those eggs. So it really, is good, in terms of the egg condition, once they come out of that fish.
Wow, that is fascinating. I had no idea about the injecting the air in there and all that.
Yep.
That is fascinating.
Yep. And it's really cool to see, like, when we get right in the peak of the spawn, meaning those females, pretty much if we net them that day, up on the lake and then bring them down, they're ready to spawn. All those eggs will come out just like nothing sometimes,
Wow.
Versus, if we catch them earlier in the spawn, and they're kind of ripe, they'll only give up a few eggs just because they haven't released from that skein yet, Dale. And so it's really neat. And I noticed it this year. I mean, we were seeing a lot of eggs come out at the very end, meaning those females were ripe and ready to go, and the eggs were ready to get fertilized.
Wow, that is just so interesting how that works. Now, once you've released the eggs out of the female or extracted the milk from the males, then does the fish just die at that point, or what happens then?
Yeah, so we will euthanize them before that whole part. We will, knock them out, just so they're not moving around or anything like that. And again, these fish are going to die. So yeah, we do that before any collection of eggs or sperm from the males.
Okay, that makes sense, because I've tried to pull a hook out of some of these, and they are strong, big fish.
Yes.
I was wondering, how the heck do you hang on to the dang things?
Yes.
So they get euthanized, done. Now, after the fish, you've done that, so now it's a great big dead fish. What do you do with the meat? Is it just gone, or do you give it away, or how does that work?
Yep, we give it away to anybody from the public, and especially like if anglers were coming to fish Fort Peck and they didn't have any luck, here's their chance. So we give those fish away to folks who might be interested, and that way they can at least have something, and the fish go to good use.
Yeah. So is the meat still pretty good? Because I know, when you later in the year, when when it's snagging season and that, and you catch some of those, they look a little worse for wear on the outside. Is the meat still pretty good on the inside? I've never done the snagging, so I've never seen them that late in the year.
Yeah, it definitely takes on a different appearance. I will give you that, and especially if you fillet one of those fish, that's snagged or caught in October, the meat is actually pretty light in color. And it does get soft. I will say that it's definitely not as firm as, a fish that you caught, say downrigging in August, or even, maybe first part of September. But it's softer, I guess what I hear from most people, and, you can definitely can it or smoke it if you like, that's kind of the typical go-to methods, it seems like.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Is a lot of people that time of the year will smoke them or use it as kind of like, I've even heard of some people making like a salmon pate, or a salmon salad, if you will.
Sure.
So there's all kinds of different uses for it. So now we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll unveil just how many eggs you and your gang were able to get, because this is what a lot of people want to know, because that kind of gives us an idea of what that fishing is going to be like down the road. So we'll talk about that right after this. My friends at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer are proud authorized dealers of some of the most highly revered brands in the world, like CM Truck Beds, Diamond Sea Trailers, and of course, Boss Snowplows. Now, I know some of you may not want to think about this right now, but sorry, we have to face the fact that before we know it, fall will be over and winter will be with us for a long time. Now, last winter, we got off a little easier than in the past years, but this year it will likely be much different. Now, why do I say that? A while back, I did a podcast with Matthew Rosencrans in the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center. He said that his long-term prediction models show that Montana and other areas in the Northwest are in for more precipitation this winter. Could be lots more. Of course, that means snow, and that means driveways, parking lots, and roads will need to be plowed. And of course, that means you'll want a Boss snowplow to get the job done quickly and perfectly every time it snows. And that, my friends, can only mean one thing. You need to talk to Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer right now about a Boss snowplow for your truck, tractor, ATV, or UTV, or whatever you're going to put it on. You need to do this now before they run out of them. You'll be prepared for what is coming, because not only will you have the best snowplow in the world that is perfectly designed for what you want to put it on, but the folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer will install it for you so it works the first time and every time. Now, this is the time, my friends, to be ready this winter with the best. a Boss snowplow from Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Now, if you're in the area, you can just stop by at 5680 Expressway in Missoula, Montana, or you can just go see them at rmtte.com. rmtte.com. Take a look at all the Boss snowplows they have right now, as well as the other equipment like CM truck beds and Diamond C trailers that will also make your life so much easier this winter. Yeah, there's no better place to get ready for winter than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Go see them now at rmtte.com. That's rmtte.com. We're back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thank you to all of our sponsors. I'll tell you, Superior Hardwoods and Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer have been with us right from the beginning, and we wouldn't be able to do this podcast without them, and they do such a great job. So do support those guys and take a look at what they have, especially this time of year. Now's the time to get your new floors or get your remodeling done and things slow down, or especially those of you that are in the market for that Boss snowplow. It's coming. You're going to need it. So how did we do this year? You're out there collecting the eggs. So first of all, I need to know, how the heck do you count them? Is it like an estimate thing? How do you do that?
Yep. It's by estimate-ish, I guess, if you will. There's a number of eggs that are counted out, and basically like 100 eggs, and then you can weigh those eggs and then give you an idea on, the volume of them, and then just extrapolate it from there.
Yeah, kind of like, in a way, like we do for fishing contests now by, the average fish of that length usually weighs that much. So now you just do the length, and that's going to tell you about how much it weighs. So same kind of thing. So how many eggs were you able to come up with this year?
We actually ended up with a little over 842,000 this year.
Wow.
Yeah. And
a lot.
that it is. That's it's a really good amount of eggs. We're definitely happy to get that. It's actually the second most eggs that we've collected. Since kind of really the salmon collection spawning program has been going on Fort Peck. And I will say, though, we're kind of maxed out to what we can hold here at the Fort Peck hatchery. So yeah, everything is filled up. Yeah,
there's only so many fish you can, do that with and raise and all that stuff. So 842,000, did you say?
Yep, 842,000.
So what was the most, since this was the second most, what was the most that you've ever collected?
So the most was actually a little over 1 million. Ooh. 1 year. It was actually back in 2016. So not too long ago, but it was a while ago.
Uh-huh.
And I will say, that year there was, it was a lot of eggs and a lot of fish, and there was eggs, everywhere. It seemed like
eggs aplenty.
Yeah. And typically, we put these eggs like in incubation jars. That's what the crew here at Fort Peck Hatchery has found to work the best in terms of, getting good survival and eye up and hatching success versus another incubation device called a Heath tray. But anyway, there was a lot of stuff going on that 1 year in 2016. But yeah.
Well, this is not too bad. So now let's talk about how that then equates to the fish that we would be catching. These fish that you collected here just recently, we would be catching those somewhere between 2 and 4 years from now, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
And on a survival rate, out of those 842,000 eggs, how many fish do you figure you end up with that go back into Fort Peck?
Well, I guess to give you an example, so last year we did pretty well also in our collection efforts, and we collected 809,000 eggs. And when it was all said and done this spring, from those efforts, we actually ended up stocking out, let's see, like 300 and almost 380,000, Dale.
Okay.
So we stocked a lot this spring.
Yeah. So So, I mean, the good news there is we're going to have some really good classes of fish coming down the road here, aren't we?
Well, I'm hoping so, and I will say numbers help, but
Sure.
I use this analogy all the time. I feel like maybe I use it too much, and it's the truth though. It's a lot like farming. We have to have really good conditions in terms of habitat and definitely forage, when we stock those salmon or actually whatever fish, walleye too.
Yeah.
It really goes hand in hand. We can, hopefully get the eggs needed to turn into fish, to get to stock out, but then we need some help from Mother Nature too, and one of the big drivers that we see in terms of, like good survival and good growth and good returns is when we see, like moderate to good year classes of age 0 Cisco stock that same year.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because that obviously they're going to need that food and all that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
when we're looking at it, you say, okay, these eggs and these incubators are looking really good. Now at some point they're going to hatch, and then how long do these little fish, which are now like little minnows and stuff, how long do they hang out with you guys before they head out to Fort Peck?
So typically it seems like the salmon will hatch out around Christmas time, for the most part. And then they will remain, in the Fort Peck hatchery until about the end of May, first part of June. Although they will get transferred a couple times because, as these fish start to grow, they're eating feed. You kind of need to give them more room,
Sure,
which means more room, more water, to keep up good growth rates on them. So they'll stay, either in some tanks, and then some will go out to the raceways as well here at Fort Peck. And like I say, they'll spend another, 5 months down here at the Fort Peck hatchery.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you keep, once they get out into the raceway, now they're getting a little bit bigger. About how long are they when they go into the raceways?
I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like close to maybe 2 inches or something like that.
Okay.
Dale, I can't remember. That'd be a good question for Wade.
All right, right. So how do they keep the birds and stuff from eating them at that point?
There's some netting that they put over. Yeah. Yep.
So when it's time to stock them, say in May, where they're going to now go into Fort Peck, how many do you figure are going to survive that? Because I imagine you got a lot of predator fish that are going, hey, this is this is dinner time here.
Yeah.
And then you've got fish. So they're about how long when they actually get put into Fort Peck?
Well, anywhere from 3 to 4, and honestly, and again, big thanks, shout out to the guys at the hatchery for raising these salmon. They do a tremendous job with what they have, but they try and get them to hopefully 5 inches in size. And you bring up a good question about predators and stuff, and that's also kind of one of the things that why we do, I guess, what we do in terms of stocking, Dale. We hold off, until end of May, first part of June, because, for a couple things, try and get those salmon, hopefully as big as possible, and then release them here near the dam area. And one thing that we know, our water temperatures are typically cooler. They can kind of roam wherever they want to once, they get unloaded from the truck. They can go into some shallow areas where there's weeds and maybe aquatic invertebrates. We also see our plankton densities kind of peak at this time, so we want to coincide with that. And then again, if there's a good group of Cisco out there at 5 inches, they can start getting on top of them relatively soon. Oh, and then the last thing, like I said, is from that predator standpoint, we don't have as many predators up in this area this time of year. And if we do, we have those cooler water temperatures and those fish aren't as active, meaning the predators aren't feeding as often, because when we see warmer temps, the metabolism of like walleyes, pike, bass, shoot, catfish, list goes on, even goldeye. They're going to start to feed more on other fish. And well, if, there's salmon there, sometimes they're fair game too. As much as I'd like to, I tell this to people, as much as I'd like to say, okay, you guys stay over here and we release you salmon and you stay over here. It doesn't always work that way, but I guess if that makes, that's why we do what we do and kind of why we stock where we stock and the time and everything like that.
Yeah, I can just picture Wade who does that incredible job at the hatchery, he and his staff. I can just picture them out there saying, leave my babies alone. Let them be. So they're off now into Fort Peck. They're swimming around. They're trying to stay alive and all that. And at some point, they get big enough for it. Now they kind of become the apex predator of the reservoir at that point, because now they're getting big enough where there's not a lot that really is going to prey on them. And then from there, the whole cycle starts over again. So as far as the areas that you're picking to put these fish in, because I hear this a lot too, of everyone's got their armchair biologists that say, okay, well, they really should be putting them over here or over there. The way you're picking those is what? Is it mainly just like you were saying, because you're picking places that have less predators and all that? Or is it just the ease of where you can put them in? Or tell us a bit about that selection process.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of it is, going back to that whole predator, example of, like I said, because we know, in the springtime, there's good numbers of walleyes and pike up in the dry arm. And then the further west you get, same. And then, again, there's additional predators, catfish, goldeye, smallmouth bass, the list goes on. And so we want to, we put a lot of effort into raising these fish and collecting these fish in the fall. We want to make sure that we give those fish the best possible chance we can, when we pull that, tube and open it up and let the fish go out. And we know that some fish are going to get gobbled up regardless, but we want to make sure that we give them the best chance so they can go out there, swim, people can catch them. And then again, just kind of like the other part of it too, it's like, we want to make sure that, we can hopefully get those fish in the fall, because we need those fish to continue this fishery.
Exactly. So now some folks I've heard said, well, like over in Hell Creek, which, as far as places where fishermen gather, obviously down at Fort Peck Marina and around that area a lot, but Hell Creek is a big area for the folks that are coming up through Jordan and all that area, have said, well, why don't you give us a little love too and deposit some into the Hell Creek area? Is that a possibility, or is it just too many walleye in the area, or is that are you considering that?
Yeah, no, well, I'm definitely concerned about, what the predation rates would be, Dale, compared to, like I just mentioned, and that's why we do what we do, and the other thing is too, we have that cold water habitat up here, where those fish can freely go in and out, especially closer to spawning time. We do temperature and dissolved oxygen readings, down, well, actually throughout the reservoir. And,
okay.
And we do see, like, during the month of September, we see some, even though it's like, this year, I think, roughly 90 some feet out, kind of out at the mouth of Hell Creek there, maybe a little bit deeper, we're still seeing, water temps that are, almost, I think it was 54 degrees down at the very bottom, which it's kind of on the fringe of what, some salmon can tolerate. And then also the big one is dissolved, dissolved oxygen levels. If they don't have, stuff around 5 parts per million, it's going to be a little detrimental to them, and it's going to act as, well, a barrier, if you will.
Right.
So, and like this year, I believe it was around 3 parts per million, so lower than, what those fish would want to be found in.
I'm glad that you explained that, because that makes total sense. And so it's not just, Oh, well, we could put them anywhere. There is definitely a science to it, and that's
Yes.
why they end up where they're going to end up.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Well, we have answered a lot of questions here. I know a lot of the questions that I had just from people that have emailed me, and that you have covered it very, very well here. So
I hope so, but I'm sure there'll probably be more.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, if you folks that are listening have questions, I'm going to have Heath's email there and mine, and just send us an email, and I know Heath will get back to you when you can, and if you want to send it to me, fine, and I'll go seek out answers from Heath and Wade and those guys too. So we will get your questions answered. We try to get every single one answered. So, and in fact, we do have a new feature now where there is a button right up at the top of that podcast description that you can click and you can text us, and those texts will go right to me. And then I'll make sure that we get that. And it does not collect your phone number, so I won't have your phone number. I'll just see your question. So don't worry, I'm not going to, be stalking you or selling your number or any of that. We're not interested in doing that. And the same with emails. We don't sell the emails or any of that. It's just strictly there for you to get your questions answered. So I hope all of you are listening, that if there's anything you've heard here that you'd like more information, feel free to do it, because we'd love to fill you in, because it is a really interesting topic, and it really has become a draw for Fort Peck, hasn't it, Heath? I mean,
absolutely. Matter of fact, when we did a creel survey last year, there was actually more guys, kind of near this dam area here, just allocating, their time to chasing Chinook salmon, like during August than really walleye, or it was, kind of a close tie anyway. But I don't have to tell you, blackjaw fever takes over real quick.
Yeah, and it's great for the economy from Glasgow and even beyond, and the Fort Peck area and everywhere, really. And, we catch salmon, especially earlier in the early parts of July, and that, I mean, we're going way out past. I mean, there's areas around by Fort Peck you're going to see them in that, or not Fort Peck, but Hell Creek and that. So I mean, they're everywhere, and that's the other thing. People need to do a little thinking and talk to some of the guides and that around. It's not just at the dam that you're catching these, especially early in the season.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, at that time, water temperatures are cool, and those salmon can be anywhere they please if it's within, their temperature preference, and then Cisco as well.
Exactly. Yeah, they're following the Cisco. I mean, that's their food.
But then, as summer heats up and gets warmer, that cold water habitat that they really prefer, it kind of shrinks a little bit for them, and kind of, congregates them to a certain degree. There's still a lot of water out there. I'm going to put that that out there as well, but definitely.
Yeah. And you folks be sure and send us your pictures when you start catching these fish. We love to get those pictures, and you can email them to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com, and Manny will give you my email address again, and of course it's down in the podcast description too. But send us those pictures. We love to have them. And I know you like to see those too, don't you, Heath?
Oh, absolutely. No, it's really impressive, and just to see the fish, obviously, but then hear about people having success, because I mean, I love to go out there as well, and fish for these and scratch my head at times, but every once in a while we all get rewarded if we put in our time and do our due diligence, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll do another show as we come around to the beginnings of that blackjaw fever season next summer, and we'll get into interviewing some of these top anglers that'll give you some good ideas of how to fish for these beautiful fish and how to catch them. So we'll do that too. So it is something for sure to find out. Now, one last question before I let you go. When you're able to do that ear deal, say that again, the otoliths?
The otoliths.
Otoliths. When you're looking at those, is there a way that you can see where they've been? Because I know sometimes that otolith will allow for, I know some fish you can know where they've been at, can't you?
Yeah. Yep. You can, and I believe, I know it's called otolith microchemistry, essentially looking at, specific signatures that are in the water, like strontium, calcium, barium, that sort of thing. And sometimes, depending on the water body, if those differences exist in certain parts of the river, stream, or a reservoir, you could potentially tell where that fish has been and where it originated. We actually did that with walleyes up here on Fort Peck to kind of look at their natal origin, if you will, or where they were hatched.
Now, have you done that with any of the Chinook salmon at all?
We have not done that with the Chinook salmon, no.
Well, give that a try if you can. I know that's probably a pretty big expense and stuff, but
Yeah.
All right. Well, and I suppose you're not going to tell me where you hide the keys to that shocker boat, are you?
I wish I could, but nah. Well, we'll have to visit at another time, maybe.
All right. Heath Headley, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Heath, for spending so much time with me and educating us on the life of the Chinook salmon in Fort Peck Reservoir. Appreciate it, buddy.
You bet. Thank you. And I just like to say, big thanks to the crews here at Fort Peck, at the hatchery and staff that I work with. And I would also include North and South Dakota because, boy, they've helped us out with our salmon program, over the years in terms of getting eggs, from them to raise as fish to stock the following spring. And then just information sharing too. That's what all this is about.
Yep. Yeah. And then thanks to all you fishermen for buying the licenses and doing what you're doing. It keeps us all going. All right, Heath. Well, we'll talk to you again soon. You take care and get some rest after doing all that egg collection. That had to be a huge effort. So take care.
Will do. Thank you. All
right. Heath Headley, there you go, folks. He has given us a lot of interesting science that you can sit back and absorb. I'm going to have some links down there to give you some other interesting things. I'll round up some more information for you, too, just to give you a little more reading if you like. Until then, folks, we'll be back, of course, talking more about hunting and all kinds of things. And then we'll be getting into ice fishing, and we're going to have a whole series all about ice fishing and where to find them, how to do it, and talking about the different ice fishing tournaments and stuff, too. So until we talk again, take care, be safe out there, and be good to each other. And we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.